Michigan is on the road for the first time this year. A couple years ago, it was the second road game, week 6, in the building right behind me, Memorial Stadium, here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Let's talk about expectations for this Michigan football team as they take on the Cornhuskers on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Friday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your man on the ground, literally here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Apologies if there is excess wind. I have a windsock on the microphone and everything, but it is extremely windy. It is extremely warm. Doesn't actually feel quite as warm. That is one consideration for this Michigan football team on Saturday. It is currently 90 degrees out here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and windy, and that's exactly the type of conditions that Michigan will be seeing. It will be 95, sunny and windy here, so that will be a much different thing. And now they said that they practiced in Glick. I'm assuming turned the heat up. Going to plan on hydrating quite a bit. I will obviously be also partaking in those festivities, being down on the field, not up in a cushy, comfy press box as it usually is. Hence, I'm your man on the ground. But it is definitely going to be a bit of a change. When I left Ann Arbor this morning, it was 61. I think the high was going to be somewhere around 67. Certainly, they've practiced in weather that was warm, 95. I don't know that we saw those temperatures during fall camp, so it is going to be a different scenario. So let's start with the offensive side of the ball for Michigan and what to kind of expect for the Wolverines in this game. So if you look at Nebraska's run defense, that's obviously their strength. Right, they have the number 2. I know everyone's saying number 1. When I look on CFB stats, they're listed as the number 2 rush defense. I believe James Madison is number 1. But Nebraska has yet to give up more than 56 yards in any given game. So that tells you that they are stout, right? They can stop the run. Not so fast. As we talked about on the podcast the other day, there were teams that they were facing that were not exactly out there just really pounding the rock, right? Colorado has yet to eclipse 100 yards in a game. They played Northern Illinois, not exactly a paragon of rushing prowess. So is Nebraska really good at stopping the run? I guess we will find out this next game. Now, here's the thing about Jim Harbaugh. You might sit there and say, all right, they're not going to run the ball, right? Because Nebraska's pass defense is a little bit more porous. Is the number 24 overall defense that indicates, I don't know offhand where the pass defense is, but that indicates a little bit about where they are. So with that in mind, I mean, when you think back to Penn State last year, Michigan came in, if you remember Urban Meyer's out there saying, Michigan will not be able to run the ball against Penn State. But guess what they did? They ran the ball for 418 yards against Penn State. So just because you have a really good run defense before you play Michigan, it does not mean that you are going to be able to stop Michigan's run game. Now, other teams have done it. Certainly, I'm sure that Nebraska has gone and they have looked at what ECU did in particular, probably, and said, we need to replicate that in addition to what we are already doing. We need to stop the run. Now, certainly, Michigan can pass the ball. Nebraska has given up a lot of yards in the passing game. So I look at that and say, yes, if they can't run the ball, if they do find out, okay, yes, this is actually a really good run defense, we can't do anything against it. Michigan does have the option of passing the football with J.J. McCarthy. Now, pretty good week last week. I believe only 143 yards if my memory serves. Not anything crazy, but a lot more efficient. Didn't make the same mistakes that he made in week 3. But when you saw what he did in weeks 1 and weeks 2, when he passed for 280 yards and 278 yards respectively, you know he can throw the football. So first off, if Robin Wilson is indeed here, and he was in the picture that was Michigan posted saying that they were leaving for Nebraska, wrap him in bubble wrap, because it's week 5, right? It's his favorite thing is to get injured in week 5. So say, hey, I know you want to do this, just don't. Please don't. And get him the football. Hopefully Cornelius Johnson has a little bit of a bounce back game. But I really want to see, I think this is a pretty good test for the Michigan front. Now, keep this in mind. Michigan at least entering last week, did not believe that Nebraska's front was going to be tougher than Rutgers. They believed that Rutgers was going to be the tougher defensive matchup. They believed that Rutgers was going to be the tougher matchup on both sides of the ball. So we'll see what ends up happening. For those of you who are only getting audio on this, I did a little gesture, okay? So I forget sometimes that we're not necessarily just strictly doing video here, even though the audio always goes up before the video. Anyway, so you have an opportunity to potentially pass the ball. I of course want to see what happens with those tight ends. I'd love to see not just Colston Loveland get involved, but I'd also really like to see A.J. Barner get involved. This feels like a game where he could really stretch the field. He can be both an outlet, he can be a downfield guy, but we saw Colston Loveland really start to get acclimated and really start to put it on. He led the team in receiving yards last week, so it would be interesting to see. Now, I remember Eric All had a couple big plays last time that I was back in this building behind me, as did Blake Corum, so it'll be interesting to see. Obviously Hassan Haskins as well, he's not here. So it'll be interesting to see what route Michigan decides to go with when it comes to trying to get the offense going. And it'll be interesting also to see how efficient are they, what kind of decision making does J.J. McCarthy make, because that is obviously just keeping him in rhythm is of paramount importance. And whether they decide to run 40 times a game like they did last week or have a little bit more balance, you still need to have J.J. McCarthy continue to stack good games upon good games so that he already has the confidence to be able to go up against Penn State and Ohio State. He's beaten both, but you still want to continue to add to that because there are tougher games coming up and you don't want to see him struggle against the teams that aren't maybe necessarily quite as good. Now that said, Matt Rule does have this game probably circled on his calendar, right? This is like it's not the first big test, of course, because they lost the first two games, Minnesota and Colorado. But this is a game, especially now that they have Heinrich Harburg starting at quarterback. We might see some Jeff Sims. I think that might be a mistake if I'm Matt Rule to put Jeff Sims out there unless you're strictly keeping him in for run plays, and that might be tipping the hand a little bit. I do think that this is the barometer. I'm sure this is the game that they prepared for more so than Minnesota and Colorado. They have won the last two games, both Group of 5 opponents, both teams that they should have beaten, Louisiana Tech and Northern Illinois. So it will be interesting to see exactly how this ends up working. All right, we're going to move on. We are going to discuss Michigan's defense, and then we'll get to the prediction. We'll do that here in just one moment. But before we do, passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. I'm going to need to use it after driving as much as I did today, and will do on Sunday, and will do next week, that's for sure. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. I'll tell you what, you weren't going to get this. If you're watching on video, you were not going to get this view today. That was not in the cards. My hotel is in Omaha. The intent was to record in my hotel room in Omaha. You will get a podcast from there. The mailbag will come also either later tonight or early tomorrow before the game at some point. We'll try to make that as applicable so that you can listen to it on Sunday as well. And then we will also have a post game on either Saturday or Sunday. That will actually most likely be from the car. We'll see how that works. Never done that, but that'll be a fun thing to try out. You'll probably also get the same thing with Minnesota. But why am I here? Why am I standing right here in front of the stadium if I'm staying in Omaha? It wasn't just because I wanted to come and see it. I didn't want to drive 40 miles out of my way just to be like, all right, yeah, let's see the stadium I've already seen before. It's because I forgot my parking pass on my side table right next to my couch, because they send it earlier in the week. And And yeah, I was about 20 miles into Iowa, and I all of a sudden realized I did not bring my parking pass, so I had to come here to Memorial Stadium a little bit early after driving from for all the way from Ann Arbor today. A good 11-hour drive. But we made it here, and hopefully we make it back fine to Omaha and continue to crank out some content. Might be some sleepy content, but there will be content, and go from there. If you see me looking over, if you're watching on video, you see me looking over at a train. If you can probably hear it, even with any kind of audio augmentation that I am doing on this episode, so apologies for that. All right, let's get to the Michigan defensive side of the ball. I do think it is a bad thing in a big way that Mason Graham is unable to go. I don't think it was necessarily, now they did manage to handle Rutgers' Kyle Monangai, who was the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week. They managed to really shut him down, and they shut down Gavin Wimsatt, so it almost kind of makes the point I was about to make somewhat moot. But nonetheless, this is a little bit of a different animal. Heinrich Harburg has been phenomenal at running the football. They're running an option game. Michigan is going to have to be really, really smart and really, really prepared. We've seen the pass rush starting to get home a lot from the interior. This is where we're really going to need to see contain work even more than it did against Rutgers this last week. Because if they are pushing the quarterback out of the pocket, you need to have those ends to be able to corral them. Now, we know the two ends that have been the most productive thus far. Jalen Harrell has certainly been a dude, right? He's got, 2.5 sacks on the season. Derek Moore has been absolutely phenomenal as well. This is a game where I'd really like to see Braden McGregor take off, or see Derek Moore take off to another level. Week 5 is kind of the week when you start to see guys starting to move a little bit, right? Mike Morris and Ayabiyoki had big games against Iowa. So did Mason Graham. I think the most quintessential in the recent memory, though, is David Ojabo. No one was talking really about David Ojabo until week 5, and he comes out against Wisconsin in 2021, and he is an absolute force, right? Weeks 5 and 6 are kind of those movement weeks, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, where guys start to really come on in ways that maybe you didn't see before. Now, obviously, there are guys that we haven't seen a lot of this year that could have really big games. Now, Heinrich Harburg, the quarterback, mobile quarterback, not super accurate with his arm, not necessarily throwing for many yards, but certainly moving the ball downfield. Has not really turned over the football, has been able to take care of it. It's the Michigan front's job, not just the line, but also those linebackers, to really force him, and this is why I think it would be stupid if Matt Rule put Jeff Sims in, is because you've got Rod Moore back, you've got Will Johnson back. Having those players who have not necessarily played a lot this year, right? Will Johnson played a series in a game, Rod Moore only one game, had one big mistake to start off the game, and then that was pretty much it. You get the two guys who led the team in interceptions last year. Rod Moore just has a nose for the football when it's in the air. Will Johnson, all the same, right? And also, you've seen some of the smarts in the Purdue game, in the Big Ten championship game last year. That gives a kind of an opportunity for them to finally get some of that. Now, Mike Sainer still leads in interceptions. He's got 2. I believe 2, 3, something like that, 2, I believe. So obviously, he's also a guy that can make those plays. You might remember some big plays last time around. You got the Daxton Hill play. You've got the Brad Hawkins play. Hopefully it won't come to a late fourth quarter scenario for the Wolverines, but it is a game in which I do feel like you're going to see a couple turnovers, because I feel like that's kind of what this defense is starting to do, especially against teams that are going to have to try to force the issue, right? Jeff Sims was a turnover machine, loved turning the ball over, kind of his favorite thing. So I don't think it would be a very smart idea if you're Matt Rule to put him out there against these guys that we've seen that are ball hawks that are finally back in the game. So it'll be really interesting to see how that dynamic works, and to see how much the defensive front is able to have that contain, able to make a lot of big plays, and really kind of force the issue. Forcing Nebraska out of what it wants to do, I think, is paramount for the Wolverines, and we'll see if they're able to do it. So I think that's the key. Now, the linebackers, I think we're not talking about them enough, right? Because in a game like this, when you have a mobile quarterback, they also are going to try to run the football with the running back. They'll make some sparing plays in the passing game. It's really going to be up to the linebackers to be able to A, shadow Heinrich Harburg and or Jeff Sims, and then B, to be able to just get to the running back, to whoever has that football. If they're able to get past that first level, that second level needs to be able to come up and make plays. Now, Michigan has done a fantastic job. They did a fantastic job against Rutgers last week. They've done a fantastic job in general. Really, only yards we've seen in the run game minus, I don't even remember if it was a pass play or a run play. It was pass play. It was pass play of that Rutgers touchdown. But generally, what we have seen is that we have seen the bulk of the yards come in garbage time, right? Michigan's defense is better than what the stats say, and the stats say they are elite. Now, what teams have they faced? Facing a Big Ten team, even a Nebraska team that's struggled mightily over the course of the last several years. It's still a step up in competition. These are still a lot of those players that were losing games by just one possession. And they're going to be fired up in this stadium when they see the winged helmet. So I'm really interested to see how Michigan responds. So let's talk about how Michigan might respond to that, because it is a little bit of a different thing, right? Playing on the road compared to playing at home. Michigan handled it well the last 2 years, of course. It's a new year. It's new players across the board. Let's get into my full-on prediction here in just one moment. I think one of the interesting things about Iowa and Nebraska is that it's big sky country, and right now it's sunset here, and I would turn the camera around, but you would just see my car. I have it trying to block a little bit of the wind so the camera does not fall over. But it's a different sky than what we have in Michigan. It's absolutely beautiful, and driving through, obviously it's just a sliver of Nebraska, but Iowa, I've driven through Iowa, but actually I had my eyes closed when I moved to California. My roommate was driving. It is a gorgeous state to drive through. I just really enjoy it. It's rolling hills pretty much from start to finish. It's absolutely beautiful. So another interesting thing here is I've been here in this the parking lot outside of Memorial Stadium is I keep on seeing Michigan fans arriving and taking pictures of the stadium and kind of walking around. There's some behind me that you can't see off camera if you're watching on video that are taking pictures with the statue of Tom Osborne, and yeah, it's a very. This is hallowed ground. I know Nebraska's really struggled recently, but this is still like one of the cathedrals of college football. Hence, you've heard from the Michigan players this week about like how special that game was in 2021. That was maybe their favorite outside of obviously Ohio State and maybe Penn State, Big Ten championship, Rutgers. No, okay, I'm just messing there. But I mean, the atmosphere was incredible. It was night. You're not going to have night. It's going to be full sun at the time that they do they do Thunderstruck between third and fourth quarters. But I mean, it was special. And that's kind of the model for why I loved that they upgraded Michigan's lights at the Big House. So it is going to be cool. But that means that they're going to have to weather the storm, right? Because there will be a storm, no matter how not great Nebraska is on paper. There will be a storm because it is a road game, right? You've seen the Indianas and the Rutgers of the world have those big runs. Rutgers had a lead at halftime, so Michigan's going to have to weather a storm. Right, there might be some trick plays and things that Matt Rule has prepared for the Wolverines that we haven't necessarily seen to this point. So it is going to be incumbent upon Michigan to find a way to weather that storm. Unlike playing at Indiana or Rutgers, that stadium behind me is going to be full and it is going to be raucous. They have the biggest sellout streak in all of college football. It dates back to 1833, something like that. I don't fact check me on that. I know I'm right. But it's going to be a raucous environment. Michigan needs to be able to weather that storm. I think the most important thing is to come out in a similar fashion to how Michigan did against Iowa in Week 5 last year. if you remember week 5 in 2021, it took them a little bit to get on the board there against Wisconsin. They did get that early lead. They did have the halftime lead. Things got a little dicey for a quick second after a quick score, and then at the end of the half to make it, I think it was 13-10, and then the second half opens with Daxton Hill absolutely destroying Graham Mertz, and the game completely turned on its head from there. But against Iowa, if you remember, you had that first script that Michigan had. And obviously, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know where you're going to get the ball, right? Because I'm sure that they had a great script for the first possession of 2023, as it were, but Michigan was backed up to their own goal line. That changes things incredibly. If Michigan can get the ball 20, 25, 30, I want to see how they respond. How do they drive the field? What is their plan, right? How much have they thought this one through? Because it's a little bit different than the last 2 years, right? Because before it was, they haven't won in Madison in 20 years. Michigan never wins at Madison. They need to win at Madison. It's going to be difficult. Then they go to Iowa the next year. Michigan never wins at Iowa. Iowa's a difficult place to play, right? Kinnick is just a house of horrors. Michigan won the last time they were in this building. And there's a lot of players on this team that were on that team. Now there are a lot that weren't, right? You got your Colston Lovelands of the world, your Darius Clemens, if he's around or whatever, we'll see. But a lot of them weren't necessarily playing in those games, in that game. So, are they going to rely on a guy like Samaj Morgan, Fred Moore? Are they going to rely on some of those freshmen? DJ Waller, Jair Hill, guys that we've seen in the first half of games getting their opportunity. So it will be very interesting to see what the motivation is, because this isn't like the last 2 years where they were out to prove something. They have to self-generate in a way that maybe they hadn't before. Now, that said, I think Nebraska is very talented at running the football. They've found a formula, but I think that they've been able to do that formula against overmatched teams. I think that Michigan's defense, even without Mason Graham, who I think is the best run defender that Michigan has, I think Michigan's just going to be too much for them in that department. And I don't think that either of their quarterbacks, Heinrich Harburg or Jeff Sims, have the throwing prowess to be able to move the ball against this secondary. On the other side, Nebraska's really good at stopping the run. They've had teams that don't really love to run the football. This is a different style of team that they haven't had to see. I don't know if Michigan's going to be able to run the ball the way they want to. I don't know if it's going to be like the last 2 week 5s against a stout run defense in Wisconsin or Iowa. I do know that Nebraska has a little bit more of a porous pass defense. J.J. McCarthy and the receivers are good enough to take advantage of that. If Michigan stays true to the run, you can use play action, you can use J.J.'s legs as well to really upset that. My final score prediction for tomorrow in the 95-degree swirling wind weather here in Lincoln, Nebraska, I think this is what I typed when I did my prediction on Wolverines Wire. Michigan 34. I think it was 35, but I don't remember. I'm going to say Michigan 34, Nebraska 9. Kind of hope that's a touchdown and a safety, because I want to see the balloons go up. I think the balloons only go up with the touchdown. Maybe it's a field goal too. I'm not sure. Anyway, that's going to do it for us here tonight on this episode, at least. We will get to the mailbag either later tonight, early tomorrow. We'll figure out which when we get to the hotel and all of that. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again very soon. Peace.